Hello, everyone. I'm here with Ollie Williams, who's the head of repository and derivative services at DTCC at their regional headquarters in Singapore, to talk about the trade reporting landscape in Asia. Thank you so much for having us here, Ollie.
You're very welcome, Garima. It's great to see you again.
Can you talk a bit about the regulatory landscape around trade reporting in Asia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing we need to remember is that the regulatory reporting requirements are not new. We've had them for quite a while now. And in fact, Asia was one of the early adopters. We saw Hong Kong and Japan go live with trade reporting quite early on. ASIC and MAS followed, and both of them actually adopted a more staggered start to trade reporting. So we still see today that we have a number of compliance dates left for the MAS. We're completely live in Australia, but MAS we still have one this year in October 2019, and again next year in 2020, another compliance date which will see more reporters brought in and under the requirements.
How's the market evolving in response to regulation around trade reporting and around OTC reform in general?
Yeah, so early on, I think the order of the day was just get it in, so get it reported. So I think early adoption saw people using manual processes, a lot of spreadsheets and the like. And it wasn't just on the industry side as well. I think everything started with that type of approach, trade repositories and the regulators as well. Over time, we've seen the focus shift in terms of, particularly with industry, looking at the way they do their reporting. So looking at more scalable and robust solutions in terms of their technology, but also looking towards things like reconciliation. Reconciliation is a core requirement under the rules. And over time, we've seen that type of service, I guess, increase, and the usage of reconciliation services increase. I would also say that the focus has shifted much more towards quality. So quality of what you're reporting and the way you're reporting it, and being able to evidence controls. And around all of that, we've seen a shift in the industry in terms of the growth of a support industry around this, or a cottage industry, if you like, around the trade reporting. That cottage industry is providing solutions to industry, to some of these sort of challenges they have in terms of meeting those quality requirements and controls. What we see today is really, I guess, what I'd almost term an end of life for early platforms, for early trade reporting platforms. We see industry looking for solutions for their new platforms. What are they going to adopt? How are they going to use technologies that are emerging out there? And I think that is the point now that we're at, where we look at these service providers introducing new technologies. We look at industry looking at what they can do to replace their existing systems and move into a more efficient and a sort of a BAU, if you like, for trade reporting.
How are trade repositories using technology to meet regulatory and operational needs?
Sure. As I've just described, an evolution, if you like, in the way industry is approaching trade reporting, we as trade repositories, the trade repository industry also has to adapt along with that changing demand. I think the initial focus we've taken is around how do you increase transparency? How do you give more transparency into what we're holding on behalf of the firms? How do you increase the functionality within the trade repository? How do you make trade reporting more simple? And we're also working around things along the lines of the efficiency of the process itself. And more importantly, I think, as we're looking at the technologies emerging, we're working out how we can integrate our services into other services out there and provide a more front-to-back approach to trade reporting. What can we do around things like the integration of extraction, normalization, transformation services that I described earlier?
How prepared are firms in Asia for the regulation around trade reporting, and what do you think they should be considering as they ramp up their compliance efforts?
I think the first thing we say is you can never be too prepared. As we look to the next compliance date, we see people being brought in who haven't traditionally reported in some cases. So we see mixed levels of preparation. In terms of what people should be thinking about, there are many considerations. First of all, you need trusted partners in all of this. Who are your service providers? Who are the firms you'll be looking to provide some of the information you need and some of the technology you need to comply with this? Broadly speaking, we see people focusing on a number of different areas. Firstly, obviously, is the obligation itself. What is your obligation? The rules are not always simple. Once you understand what your obligation is, I think we'd encourage people to think about where's your data coming from. We have trade capture systems, we have trade confirmation systems, we have risk management systems. Where are you going to source your data from? The other big question is determination. So you know where your data is coming from, but what do you need to report from within that? Once you understand that, we're going to look at things like extraction. How do you get the data out of that source system? How do you normalize it? How do you transform it into the standard required? And then obviously you've got transmission, right? How do you get it down to the trade repository? How do you reconcile what you've sent down to that trade repository? All of this needs to be considered in the framework of controls. What controls do you have around each of the processes I've just described? I think what we're now seeing is an increase in interest in terms of what is out there to provide some of these services. And to me, that's an indication that the industry is getting ready for that compliance date.
Do you think there's a difference in the approach to regulation for banks and non-bank firms?
The answer is going to be different for different firms, but generally speaking, I think it's fair to say that we do see an increased reliance on other parts of the flow when we're talking about non-bank reporters. And what I mean by that is we will often observe that delegated reporting is used quite extensively with the non-bank reporters, as are the providers who provide some of the front-to-back reporting solutions.
That was a really insightful conversation. Thank you so much.